Welcome back to Gene and Roger Talk Movies. I'm Roger, here with Gene, but also we have our special guest director, Scott Eggleston, is back with us. He did Bad Bones, of course, which we did on episode 14, I think it was.
I forget the number.
And if you haven't...
We're grateful to have a guest.
Yes.
Scott, you're
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
You're very knowledgeable. You know, you make movies, so we love having you.
And so if you haven't listened to episode 14, well, first watch the movie Bad Bones and then listen to that episode because we dissect that one thoroughly. However, today we are talking about, I guess it's fair to say, a pretty controversial horror movie that's out right now, Skinamarink. And
I don't know if I'd use the word controversial.
Okay, divisive.
Polarizing.
No, none of those words.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Gene, initial thoughts on Skinamarink?
Yeah. I don't know. You have certain expectations for movies, I think. You know, you expect movies to have characters, that there'd be dialogue, you know, things happen. You can follow along. You can maybe have empathy with the characters. You know, all that suspension of disbelief. Yeah, I was watching this movie, but and none of those things were happening. You know, it kind of reminds me of when I was in college, you know, University of Colorado, way back in the day. I was taking this French class, and they wanted us to go watch this French movie, right? And so we were with some friends who were watching this French movie, and it's just like there's this one scene where this dude was like doing his math homework, and it was just like we were watching him do his math homework for like 20 minutes. It's like just wanted to die, you know? So it's like this movie is like 5 minutes into it, and I'm like, what is going on? It's like I don't even know how to explain it. It's like did I like this movie? I kind of appreciate the effort that was put into making this movie. I think it touches on some interesting ideas. Maybe we'll get into that later, but I don't know. Would I recommend this movie for anyone? And it's...
Scott, where are you at with Skinamarink?
I appreciated it for what it was, and if you don't know what it is going in, I mean, you're in for a surprise because, as you say, I mean, it really leans into the experimental nature of filmmaking, and it's not something that most people will like because we've been brainwashed our entire lives to expect to see movies in a certain way, like you'd mentioned, characters and a a very structured plot and you know, character development.
This movie has none of that.
Well, you're right. But because it's of an experimental nature, I was actually happy to see something like this be promoted into the mainstream because, you know, some people are probably comparing it to the Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity, and it's kind of like those movies in a way where it's unusual and it tries something different. Although it's not a found footage movie, which I'm actually happy that it's not, or it's not like Paranormal Activity, which is basically a surveillance footage movie. But in those movies, like you say, I mean, there are characters, they develop, they go through certain things, and this movie purposely does not show you even the faces of the characters.
No.
I think the closest you see is maybe the side of the kid's head.
There's no dialogue either.
There is dialogue. There's some subtitles even
a couple
in there, but
yes,
but if you don't know what you're getting when you go into this, then you're going to hate it. Because most people will. I mean, unless you're a film student, you don't watch experimental movies. You don't watch avant-garde films. You don't. You know, and this movie is clearly inspired by that type of filmmaking. So I knew going in kind of what it was trying. And if you've seen the trailer is a great. The trailer is fantastic.
I agree.
And it completely shows you what you're going to get. But what you do get is a mood piece, a tone poem. It tries to create a creepy vibe. Is really the goal of the movie. And now I would argue that it's too long. That you know your sweet spot
82
is
minutes
82
there,
minutes,
baby.
80 minutes, right? You know, Bad Bones, 80 minutes.
Yep.
And if this were a tighter film, it would be much better. And it does kind of go up and down instead of because it builds to a certain point and then it sort of drops and then it comes. So the pacing and the mood it creates is kind of uneven. But it was chilling at times. I mean, I can't deny that there were times when I was watching this at home where I was looking over my shoulder because of the sound design. and some of the imagery, which is purposely vague and grainy.
Yeah, very grainy.
Obscure.
But you bring up a point that I think, Roger, you touched on, right? It's like where you see this movie.
Yeah, because Gene and I both went like 4 o'clock showing. It was the last day it was showing at the theater. There was one other dude in the theater.
Yeah, I bet.
You know, Gene is at one end of the row. I'm at the other end because we don't want to, influence each other's opinion. But I watched it again last night on Shudder, where it's streaming currently. And what I realized is this movie was almost done a disservice by having a theatrical release because it is not really designed for a communal experience. I had my headphones on because there's a lot of stuff going on in the soundtrack of this. This movie is an audio and visual journey, I guess is the way to put it, where it relies solely on those two elements. And like Scott said, a lot of the film itself is very difficult to discern what's happening. There's shots of like corners of a wall and things like that. And so it is definitely setting this mood, but the mood plays better when you're by yourself watching it on TV with headphones and it's just you experiencing what you're seeing and hearing on this film. When we were walking out of the theater, the only thing I really said to Gene was, did they shoot this thing on 8mm and blow it up? Because it is so
really
grainy.
Yeah.
But watching it at home, the grain actually is toned down a little bit. So the projection onto the bigger screen actually made it even more grainy than it really is.
Sure.
And so the home viewing experience for me was better than the experience of the theater, although I do recommend this film. It is incredibly experimental in nature. Yes. I did not know that going in, and I don't think you did either, Gene.
I did not.
And the second viewing was better because I knew what I was getting into. I was one of those movie snobs that Scott was alluding to earlier, where I did watch a lot of these types of films, and I do appreciate most of them, and I certainly do appreciate this one. And there is a narrative story in here.
Yeah, maybe you can explain it to me.
I can. There's actually, and Scott probably has his own opinions on what this is, but watching it again, there are two things to think about with this film, because there's a piece of dialogue early on where the dad, the only time one of two times you hear the dad actually speak, he's on the phone talking about how the kid fell down the stairs, had to go to didn't need stitches or anything. And so is this movie then the after effects of this kid's concussion, right? Is he experiencing this kind of waking nightmare and kind of the audio, right? And that would explain why it's so grainy and off-putting visual-wise, because concussion, maybe his eyesight is not good and stuff like that, and so he's
very dark,
not able to focus on
dark.
things, and he's that character behaves in a non-normal way and things like that. And so is this about this kid's concussion and how it plays out? Or you also have the narrative of, is this a true house possession story? Because there is clearly an entity in there controlling things.
Clearly it's something in the house.
Things are disappearing. The entity makes the windows and doors disappear, so there's no way to get out.
And the toilet.
The toilet disappears.
Which I was lost completely by that point.
And so I've also I listened to another podcast where they were talking about it's some allegory for child abuse and stuff like that. I don't know about that. One of the great things about experimental films is you, as the singular viewer, experience this thing that's happening before you, and here's how you interpret it. And that's kind of where I'm at with this movie, and I think it's a lot more coherent narratively than a first-time viewer might catch.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. I like what you said about like each person has their own interpretation. It's so experimental. And I guess my takeaway from this movie was that it's really dark. Everything's really dark. It's like it was shot at night. I think in a way you have to see this movie at night. But it just makes me think about, if I could get a little philosophical here perhaps, is that as human beings, we're all like, we're by very nature, we're creatures of the light. Like 70% of our brain is really functions just to interpret visual stimuli. So like our brains, and we're conditioned to live our whole lives in the light. And that's what we're used to. That's what we do, and that's how it will be. But there is an entirely different world out there that I think we, because we're creatures of the light, to use that phrase, we're unaware of. There's a whole... Scientists have figured out that the mass of the universe is like like what we see is like the planets, the solar systems, the asteroids, all of those is only like 10% of the universe. There's like 90% of the universe that we cannot even see. So they have no idea what it is. It's dark. We have, there's a whole universe out there that we are, I think, as human beings, we're not capable of understanding. And I think my takeaway from this movie is trying to touch a little bit on that. It's like, what is really in the dark? Are there, I don't know, what's there? Maybe there's something there that we could experience in the light. Maybe there's not. Maybe what's in the dark is dangerous for us. I think it kind of touches on that a little bit. That whole idea of, we're creatures of the light, but there's a whole universe out there that we have know nothing about. Like, what's in that thing? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That's kind of what I got out of it.
Well, and I do like, too, because the movie is grainy. Like I said, I thought it was filmed in 8mm. Learned later, no, that was a purposeful effect on the director's part. The director is Kenneth Ball?
Kyle
Edward Ball. Thanks. Sorry, Mr. Ball, for messing up your name there. And he purposely put all those scratches on the film and laid over this graininess. And the graininess really backs up your point, because your eyes, when you're watching it, you're trying to strain through that graininess to see if you can see anything in that frame. And most of the time you can't, because it's really just this shot of Legos or whatever, right? Yeah. But that definitely backs up your point. Scott, where are you at with stuff like this?
Well, it's interesting that it's creating such a philosophical discussion.
Yeah.
We're going into deep space here with Gene.
That's me.
That's okay. No, it's interesting because it does take your mind down these paths, and like I said before, I think it does create kind of a chilling vibe. I mean, I believe, like, as a filmmaker, especially as a horror filmmaker, like one of your goals is to cast a spell right on the audience, to kind of bring them into this world, whatever it is, whatever universe you're creating, and this movie does cast a spell for sure. And, one thing that I noticed about it was, I mean, like you pointed out, Roger, it's, told from the point of view of a child or two children, right? And so you get all these camera angles are always on the ground, or they're looking up, at like 90 degrees, very, very obscure or very low angles, which I appreciated. And I also agree that there is a plot here. There are certain things that happen, although I did notice that the events that happen in this story could almost be interchangeable in a way, because some scenes I thought, I talked about it was too long. Like, if they would have taken out certain things or rearranged certain things, I don't know if you would notice, at least not in the middle, because there's certain things that happen. The setup is pretty straightforward, I think. The things disappear, the parents leave, or they, dissolve away or whatever.
Right.
And then later, after the second act, you've got several transitions that obviously are leading off, the long hallway with all the, the dissolves that keep going out and out and out. And this extremely long passage where all the Legos and toys are stacked up at the end. And then it has that strange, 571 days at one point, it says there. Like,
towards the end, I think.
Yeah, toward the end. Like, they've been trapped in this house or this. I kind of pictured it, like you'd said, that maybe it's the kid's concussion. And I almost think that they're dead. And that this is sort of like a hellscape limbo type place, where, because once they get through toward the end, they encounter this face. You don't know what it is, but it's almost like that's the end of their journey, and something is welcoming them, perhaps.
Well, and
they are welcoming something.
Yeah, but you could also look at it as the concussion, that's maybe his dad or mother standing over the bed saying, it's okay, go to sleep for a while because we want you to pull out of this concussion. So there's lots of different ways to interpret it. I've heard the hellscape version interpretation before, but I will just talk very briefly about
that toilet,
about the runtime. we'll get to the toilet, but the runtime, it's 100 minutes long, and I of course am a big supporter of 82 minutes or less. This one, I am okay with the fact that it's 100 minutes long because of the experimental nature of it. The director really needed to pull you completely into this world that he's created here on the screen. And I think the longer you drag out, a lot of these scenes it's just this shot of a corner, and it's going to go on about 5 seconds longer than your comfort level thinks it should go on. That's intentional because he wants to take you into this area of being unnerved. the whole movie is about being unnerved. The popping of the soundtrack that is all throughout the film, the dialogue that is so muffled you can't hear what it is, and the really important dialogue the director decided to subtitle, which also throws you off a little bit too. The incessant, continual cartoons that are playing is there to throw you off.
Bad cartoons.
But also the cartoons are on a certain level showing that passage of time, that 576 day, because there's the one scene where, hey, I think it's time to get up, the sister is telling the kid. They have no longer a concept of what the time is, and then it cuts to that cartoon where that little cartoon creature is getting out of bed. There's the whole thing about the death scene. There's the cartoon where the ravens are carrying that dead raven away on the little leaf that they've got. And so that cartoon is backing up kind of what's going on in this narrative of the film. But I think, again, the long running time is I've got to bring you completely into this movie and make it almost an endurance test that you're experiencing with that little child. So what say you, Scott?
Well, I never thought, I mean, I still think it could have been tighter. Interestingly, though, I also watched the short film that this was based on called Heck, because Mr. Ball has a YouTube channel, and it's...
Yeah, I watched some of those. Nightmare.
Bite-sized
7,
Nightmare.
8. 7, 8, 9.
And I will say that this movie is infinitely better than the short film, which I thought wasn't that scary, or it didn't really have the same effect on me that the movie did, which I think is very, kind of fills you with dread. And I mean, something's wrong, right? I mean, for all the things that are happening. And, and I'm not so sure about, like, the concussion theory is interesting, but I also wonder, like, because there's some scenes, okay, obviously, when we get toward the third act, right, when the house turns upside down, right, where
the chairs on the ceiling. Right,
everything's upside, the world's been turned upside down, clearly a visual metaphor that everything is completely upended, right? And then there's some shots of, well, I think, Kaylee has her eyes and mouth removed, right? In one of the jump scares in the movie.
And the only time you actually see a face straight on, except,
right,
of course, the eyes and mouth are
featureless, but then, and interestingly, like, one thing I noticed is, because I also saw it twice, both the times were on TV, never in the theater, but I like your assessment of how this plays better on a TV, because it's almost like something you are not supposed to see, like it's on, like some pirate cable channel or something, or some old VHS tape. But anyway, so I thought it was interesting that when after Kaylee goes through her transformation, and we're seeing everything from Kevin's point of view, is that we hear these like muffled sounds, and then we have the subtitles. That's what Kaylee's saying, but they're almost like whimpering, almost like she's inaudible, and it's sort of this really, she can't talk, right? So I guess it's her mouth is covered and she's whimpering. Yeah. But then later in the movie, we see Kevin, when he sees the upside down house and he's looking up, or the shot is looking up at the ceiling, which is the floor, and you see blood splattering on the ceiling, and then it goes back, and that's why I'm thinking it feels more like a hellish kind of environment, because she seems to be like she's being tortured or something, and it's not a very, if this is his vision of the afterlife, obviously it's very negative. Right. It's not a very nice place.
What happens when you have to watch those cartoons over and over.
It kind of reminded me, there was a Stephen King book, I think it was called Ritual, and I've not read the book, but I was familiar with the story, which is that people on Earth are clued into the fact that the afterlife is a terrible place, and you're being like tortured by these alien insectoid type creatures, and so once you realize that, your fear of death increases quite a bit. And that's kind of the feeling I got from this movie, is that we, as we're going toward the end of it, it becomes, more and more terrifying. But whether it has that effect on you or not is completely based on your own experience. I guess obviously not so much.
I don't know if I'd use the word terrifying.
Well, it's the longer you're in this environment, for me anyway, it was like, although because it's peaks and valleys, if it was more consistent, like I think the jump scares kind of take away from the tension building. Yeah. Because my opinion as a filmmaker and a horror film viewer is that as soon as that happens, the tension's released. If you're able to go through an entire film that does not have that, you're constantly anticipating something bad. And so that tension just grows and grows and grows and grows. Where in this movie, like a lot of horror movies, they release that tension periodically, and then you can relax as you reset, right, back to zero, and then you go up again. But
right. Well, with the jump scare part, I do agree. I'm not a big fan of jump scares. This particular film, though, I think the intentional nature of those jump scares, because the big first one really is when they discover the dad up in the bedroom. It's like, hey, look under the bed. You're waiting for something to come out from under the bed.
It's not a jump scare. Yeah,
but then they pull the camera back up, and now Mom is sitting over there. And then Mom goes away eventually into the closet, and you hear a bunch of cracking things like bones maybe, etc. And then there's this big jump scare there. But then it segues now to another kind of scene of just they're down, they're going to push the couch up to protect themselves from the evil or whatever. And I think, again, that was this intentional nature of this dreamlike quality of this film, where there's these peaks and valleys where, oh, that was scary, but now I'm down here again, kind of back in REM sleep or something, and then now I'm climbing back up. Because you're right, there are these peaks and valleys to this movie where something gets really intense, and then it's like slow again for a while.
For a long time. No, it's not slow for a while. No, it's slow the whole time. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, and that's a good point, Gene, because
it's kind of a missed opportunity for me, I have to say, because like some parts, like when the parents are on the edge of their bed and he says, "Look under the bed." I mean, that's to me, we're getting on real horror here, But then it just, it's like the director kind of didn't know where to go from there, it seems. And then, like you said, I think you're right. It's the tension gets released, and then we're like, oh.
Well, but I think it's still about just keeping you off as a viewer, right? That's the whole point of this film, is this uncomfortable nature of the viewer. But I will say, to back up Gene's point, you make it 5 minutes into this film and you're like, this movie's not for me. You can turn it off and go about the rest of your day, because it's not going to get really any different in how it performs or displays things or anything. There's no big, massive freak out thing at the end that you have to wait for. So.
Right.
Yeah, but anything else about this one, Gene, you want to talk about? We haven't talked about the disappearing toilet.
Yeah. I need some.
I have a theory about that, actually.
Yeah, Roger. I think before, like usually, Gene and Roger, the movies. We try not to talk about the movies before the podcast, because then we give stuff away and like that. But you did say earlier you had an idea about it. So now I have
I was
experienced director here has an idea too. Let's hear these ideas about the toilet, because I'm just thinking this thing. To me, the disappearing door and especially the toilet, is just silly to me, and it's just kind of like I said earlier, it's like there was I think real tension. The parents are. The mom especially is like, hey, I need you to leave right now. I need you to go. That's some real stuff. But then you have a disappearing toilet. To me, they're incongruent. It's like, what's going on here? It's like, it seems like there was not the lack of coherent vision here.
I just thought it was just another thing that created anxiety in the kids. Because if it were us, I mean, first of all, obviously the windows and the doors disappearing are alarming, but the toilet, I mean, is obviously, if you had to go to the bathroom and you're in this place for 500 days, there's no place to go to the bathroom. It's just something else, I think, that created anxiety. And I think that children and even adults see that as just an item of comfort, because it's a convenience that we all enjoy in a modern society. And if it disappears, that you're back in the Stone Age, right? You have no way to take care of yourself. So that's how I saw it. Now, I mean, whether it worked for everybody or not, I don't know, and maybe I can see how it could be confusing, because it's not, on the surface, it doesn't seem as powerful as there's no exit, I mean, unless you're trying to go that way, but.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, from the child's perspective, sure. Yeah.
Well, and I also like the fact when the toilet disappeared, it also took the entire sewer line with it, too. So it was just a flat floor.
The floor was flat, yeah.
There's no way out of this place.
I know, I noticed that.
But I think also there's really small, subtle things that happen in this film, too. Like, did you notice when the kids are eating breakfast, they have their little cereal bowl there. There's no milk in it anymore because it's been such a long passage of time, so the milk's no good anymore. So they're just eating dry cereal there.
Yeah, I was wondering if that figure was correct, the 570. Was it 76 or 70?
I think so.
70, okay.
76.
Is how would they, if they were alive, how would they survive that long without parental help? And another thing I noticed, that if I had a criticism of the way the kids are portrayed, is that, for example, if you had realized that your parents had disappeared And it was over the course of several days, you would be, any kid that age would be incredibly distraught and be crying all the time.
Right.
And I didn't hear any cries from the boy except for when, the voice told him to stick a knife in his eye, which was obviously disturbing in and of itself. To me, that kind of came out of nowhere. Like I didn't even know there was a knife involved anywhere. But the kids are not whimpering. They're not crying until, Kaylee at one point, as we mentioned earlier, kind of is. But that little boy, I think, would be a wreck, quite quickly. And I never really got that feeling, which makes me think that this isn't reality. That this is, of course, if it was a hellscape, he'd be losing his mind. I think if you realized it was, whoever that entity was, as you say, was malevolent. Because he seems to also follow it around because it tells him to come upstairs and do this and do that, and which kind of maybe buys into the fact that it might be his parents. Or they're trying to talk through the concussion or something. So he recognizes something enough.
Yeah, and I think either interpretation will work because all of the stuff that happens could be just explained away as the effects of a concussion. The concussion was so severe that his brain is just working in a way that's creating this weird stuff. But also it's an entity, right? Because at a certain point the entity says, "I want to play." Well, this is the entity's game, right? Is this kind of stuff. Kaylee didn't want to play. Kaylee wanted to go to mommy and daddy, so I'm taking your eyes and your mouth away and everything. And hey, kid, I need you to stick this knife in your eye, which he then does because he doesn't want to end up like Kaylee, who he saw what she ended up looking like. So,
and, that would have been going back to Kaylee. What happens to Kaylee? I'd be sort of interested to see because they obviously put an audio stinger in there for these jump scares. What if they didn't do that? And just let it play out exactly the same without the stinger. That would have been scary, but also not been the release, I think, of a typical jump scare. So it would have been interesting if they didn't do that. But.
No, I agree. But again, I think the audio nature of what this director is trying to do, because there is sound from the beginning to the end of this film. It's either the popping of the soundtrack or the music from the cartoons or whatever. And so some of the scares are created by just a loud noise, right? There's the scene where the boy is looking at the doll that is now up on the ceiling, and then there's some sort of noise that causes him to drop the flashlight, and you have no idea what made him do that other than this noise that came out of nowhere. But I think it's just this director using these techniques to, again, keep you off balance. That's the whole point of this film, It opens with the title card 1975 or 1995, I think it is. And you're looking at kids' feet and stuff. It's like, why can't I see everybody else? Well, no, you're into my world now where I'm going to keep you off balance the whole time. And periodically there's going to be a loud blaring noise for no reason. Because at one point, the cracking, popping of the soundtrack is jacked way up for no reason. Did you catch that?
Well, like when the physical objects disappeared, there was a loud plopping noise.
No, this is
You're
just
talking about the vinyl record.
The vinyl record kind of sound. Movie. It's a shot directly at the wood paneled wall,
house,
and for reasons I am not clear, other than just keep me off balance. He cranked that up really high with that popping and stuff, and then the phone, the little toy phone near the end, where it just has to go off and just be super loud. So that to me is the experience of this film. It's just this, it wants to keep you off balance. It wants to unnerve you with a viewing and audio experience that you're not used to. I think Scott mentioned that earlier. You're not used to a film like this.
I don't know. It's just, it goes back to like what is effective horror? It's I think there has to be some kind of empathy, like Blair Witch, you mentioned that, Scott. Is that you empathize with the character, bad things are happening, you want them to survive. It's just there's no just hook in this movie that really engages a viewer. I think you have to, as a viewer, you have to purposely allow yourself into that movie. But as a viewer, it's super easy to not go down that path. In a way, you've decided to watch the movie. We paid money to go watch it. So I'm going to give it a shot, but it doesn't, the director doesn't bring us in. He doesn't. I don't think he even tries to bring us in or hook us, to use that word. So.
Well,
yeah, I kind of don't know. It's hard to know where to go on this movie. Yeah,
I'm disagreeing with that a little bit, because the drawing you in is that graininess of the visual presentation. You have to focus, or I at least was naturally drawn to focusing. What am I seeing here? What am I looking at through this darkness? And so that's kind of the drawing part in. The experimental nature of this film's not about caring about the characters. It's about this visual and audio experience of off-putting things that are happening. You're looking at scenes that, why is the camera set that way? And it's just all this experience to get you unnerved, to then take you down this road of scaring you.
Yeah, Roger, you're you're talking. I'm sorry, we're losing something because it's this audio, right? But I'm kind of rolling my eyes a little bit. It's like, yeah, it's different. But yeah, when I'm looking at a corner for 5 minutes, it's like I'm just like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, it does try your patience. I mean, it's on purpose, as you say. They linger on shots. Yeah, I did the same thing in my movie. You linger sometimes because you want to create this uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah. But in Bad Bones, you're certainly not lingering on a corner.
No. Well, Bad Bones is a traditional story.
82 seconds.
So I will say though that a common thing, like in low budget indie filmmaking, which by the way, this movie is very interesting in the fact that I basically had the same budget as my movie. But it got a lot more attention for some reason. Wow. But it's interesting that, when horror movies are typically known as a vehicle where you don't need name actors in order to be successful with them, because the genre in and of itself is the star, And this movie is the purest form of that, right? Because not only do you not have name actors, you can't even bond with the characters that are there. Because you can't even see them. Right. You can't even see a lot of things.
The characters are abstraction for sure.
So, it's just distilling horror, I think, to its like barest of elements, which is just a creepy vibe.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And just some disturbing imagery.
Yeah, and talk about attention. There's actually a New York Times article which mentions this movie, Skinamarink. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's got buzz all over the place. The fact that it was released in a theater, even if it wasn't necessarily a great idea, it still made $2 million.
Right.
On a $15,000 budget. So.
Yeah, return on investment.
And you're going to see a ton of knockoffs of this movie, come out where people are going to be dipping their foot in the pool because they see that price. And they think, oh, well, I can make a movie like that. And I can make a movie that doesn't make any sense, which this movie does in its own way. But just like with Blair Witch, just like Paranormal Activity. Now, granted, those movies made a lot more money than this movie did. But this movie, to me, feels like that once-in-a-generation film that bucks every trend to try something else, and people notice it, and it creates its own trend. That's what I think will happen.
It'll be interesting to see if that is true, because when I'm dealing with experimental films like this, I can't think of one that really set off its own subgenre.
Right. Which is why this is impressive. It's getting to a mainstream crowd, even though a lot of people are going to react just like Gene did. It's like, I don't get this. Is dumb. I don't like it. Which is true of even mainstream movies, right? That we watch. Like this is a $100 million movie, and I don't like it. It's boring. It doesn't work. I'm leaving, kind of thing. So.
Yeah. But again, the experimental nature of this, like I said earlier, 5 minutes in, you hate what you're watching, you can turn it off. Otherwise, buckle up for the rest of the ride.
Watch the trailer. The trailer is really good. I think it just tells you exactly what you're going to get, and I think it's creepy. And it's only like a minute and a half, so if you say this isn't for me, then you don't have to spend any more time.
And I do like the trailer too. I like how it just keeps repeating this house. But then it gets the muffled audio with this house statement and upside downness and all that stuff.
Now I feel left out. Have I seen the trailer? No, I haven't seen the trailer. Now I got to watch the trailer. Maybe I'll watch the trailer and I'll like the movie more.
It's a more compressed version of the movie.
But it'll be interesting to see if this director does get an offer to do a more mainstream type horror film, and if he goes down that road to try it, because how many experimental filmmakers really broke out into the mainstream at all? Can I think of any?
Well, I mean, he cite his influences, at least on Wikipedia, as like, David Lynch, Stan Brakhage, which is really avant-garde. Maya Deren, you've seen any Maya Deren movies?
You have to give me a title.
Meshes of the Afternoon is probably her most famous. Yeah. It's like a 15-minute movie, but she made it in the 40s. And it's super surreal. It's a really cool movie. And you think about it, wow, this woman made this in the 40s. Mm-hmm. It's very Lynchian.
Okay.
So, but this movie is not, I mean, those movies, you watch a David Lynch movie or Maya Deren, and those artists, and you can, obviously there's traditional structures at work. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't know what's happening, it appears something is happening.
Right.
Where this movie is more abstract, but not as abstract as like Avant-Garde, where, I was watching, because he cited Stan Brakhage as one of his influences, so I looked up Stan Brakhage, which I recall seeing a little bit in film school. But I mean, a lot of his movies could be like scratches on the film that just play out over 30 minutes,
right.
It's really abstract. Where this is more, I mean, obviously there's something going on. There is a plot, as small and short and concise as it might be. It is there. It's not just, darkness. There's other stuff going on, but
right.
But I would be surprised too if he gets any offers, because I can't picture like a traditional producer giving this guy a screenplay and saying, "Hey, I want you to make this." It's
here's my film about
he's
a
probably
cat
better
and a
off
dog.
not doing that anyway, because he's obviously got his own thing going, and if it's working, at least for a section or for analog horror, that he should keep going that way.
Well, but I'm wondering, do you think he would try another movie exactly like this again?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because this to me, like you said, is lightning in a bottle. This is it. This is the only one that's really ever going to be like this. And even if some other knockoff organization tries to make something like this, it's never going to be this. Tons of Blair Witch ripoffs. All of them are garbage.
They're all bad.
And same thing here. But I don't even know if somebody would try this because of the divisive nature of this particular film, right? Will there ever be another film like this getting a general release at the theater?
Yeah.
I doubt it, right? And so...
Well, there could be, the movie cycle is so fast now. I mean, it's already out of the theaters, so,
Was it only like a couple of weeks? You
guys
saw at the end of the run?
So we saw it the last day, so I think it only played up here for like a week, though.
Yeah, so, the cycle is so quick. I could see somebody putting something out. Yeah, Scott, I really like what you said. Is I think if the movie was tighter, that just maybe a little shorter, just
82 minutes.
Yeah. It's just it would have been better.
Yeah, the 82-minute run mark. Definitely there could have been stuff cut out. Again, I will just reiterate that part of the longer runtime is because that guy needed to drag you into this thing full force, and so yeah, he's going to do that. So I'm giving it a pass for the only time on my violating the 82-minute runtime.
All right.
But experimental films, if you know it going in, you have a better experience. Gene and I did not know that's what this was, and so I was like, "Oh my God, I've dragged Gene to this thing," and I'm sorry about that.
No, it was good. It was good.
You're probably never going to see another film like it. So you're probably safe as far as mainstream releases.
Right, in a movie thing, right.
Even $2 million, I don't think isn't enough to raise everyone's eyebrow. As an independent filmmaker, I think is really exciting because again, you're learning a lot of these things in film school that you almost think are disposable in some ways because you'll never ever use them, but not so much in this case.
Right. Gene, any final thoughts on Skinamarink?
Yeah, I just go back to like what I was talking about earlier. Is I just think there's like a whole universe out there that we as human beings we know nothing about, and so maybe I kind of see this movie as an attempt to maybe explore that. Because really, I don't know if we've really talked about this a whole lot, but in our review, but the movie is just overall, it's just really dark. Like there's the house, all the lights are off for 95% of the time, and I think it's an exploration of darkness, and I think typical movies kind of when they talk about darkness, they get into just the usual. Tropes and the usual things we all have seen a million times. But I think this movie tries to explore darkness within a different avenue. So I can certainly appreciate the effort, so. But again, would I recommend to somebody else? I don't know. It's a hard review because I think every person watching this will walk away with something different.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah.
Scott, any final thoughts? And if you could update us on anything you're working on now?
Yeah.
Well, I think this movie is worth seeing, but again, with a disclaimer, because you don't want to say, "Hey, Grandma, I've got a great movie for you to watch."
Well, or you've got a cool grandma.
Yeah, right. Because it is. I mean, like I said, it's very exciting to see something different. We're always asking for not the same old stuff from Hollywood. And here's somebody trying something completely unusual. Yeah. And this is the movie. This is a movie that Hollywood would never make, which is kind of what you want to do as an independent filmmaker. You want to do stuff Hollywood won't even touch. Because you might actually get attention from that versus like, oh, it's just another Die Hard clone, or something that we've seen 1,000 times. But, I like what you were saying, Gene, about an exploration of darkness, because when you were saying that, it made me think that, it's funny in a Hollywood movie when someone goes into a dark room, it's lit with this nice blue glow, with nice key lighting and fills and everything and rim lights. And this movie's lit by a television set and a flashlight. That's kind of the whole thing, which made me actually kind of think is very noirish, like a film noir kind of lighting. There were certain cinematographers who sometimes lit movies with one light, and this reminded me of that because sometimes that's exactly what you're getting, a flashlight or a TV. So I think it was pretty compelling at times. I mean, I don't think it works 100%. It's not a masterpiece in my opinion. It's an interesting exploration into a genre that's been done a million times in a million different ways, and this is a way I've never seen before. So I have to give him credit for that, because for me it did work. I mean, I guess the best measure of a horror film is were you scared, during it. And there were times, like I said, when I was looking over my shoulder, especially I think the sound design had something to do with that too, because when I was wearing my headphones, as you said, you can the sound field behind you is doing weird things, and so that was pretty interesting. A lot of people have said online, I've noticed that it totally plays into, the nightmares you had as a kid, waking up in the middle of the night and your parents are unavailable or whatever. You're just running to the bathroom and back. I heard that a lot. And I think that is pretty accurate, And not only that, but it also kind of puts in its own stuff, which is exciting as a filmmaker, where it's like, oh, I haven't seen that before, like the Legos on the ceiling, and I mean, I did see other movies in this one, such as like Poltergeist was one, obviously with the TV.
And the
TV's your portal to hell and everything, and again, a lot of experimental stuff. Very non-traditional film.
Yep. Very.
And if you can appreciate that, if you're looking for something different and weird, and you're brave, give it a shot. Otherwise, avoid it like the plague. Because if you like a Disney movie is your bread and butter, then this isn't for you. So
definitely not.
I liked it.
Are you working on anything right now?
Oh, I am not currently. I had several things kind of stop and start, or start and stop. As I think I mentioned before on the podcast where we talked about Bad Bones, was that the cinematographer of Bad Bones was actually writing a movie that he was developing, and that's supposed to shoot late spring of this year, but I'm guessing it might be pushed back to fall, which all that means is I'm flying out to Louisiana where he lives to shoot that movie.
Okay.
And that's kind of changed genres a couple times. At first it was like a post-apocalyptic Western, and now it's sort of changing into a smaller budgeted sci-fi movie. So, and I'm always trying to, get a script together, again, on a small budget. I try and write things that are shootable,
right,
versus not outrageous, or because I've done that in the past, and it doesn't work very well. It's very difficult. But I'm always, and in this movie, it kind of inspires me, to look beyond the normal,
for sure,
more traditional stuff. So,
yeah, well, good. So my final thought on Skinamarink, I am going to put it in that almost masterpiece category. If you like experimental films, you absolutely need to check this one out. And again, I would highly recommend you check it out at home with headphones on by yourself, because it's not a movie for groups or anything like that. And again, if you don't like it within the first couple minutes, you can switch something else on, because you're not going to end up liking it. Gene, what are we doing next week? Are we going to do?
We have a plan.
Okay, so I think, Gene, you're going to go see that new M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Yeah, I was thinking of watching that. Just to see if it's what the latest version of this guy.
Okay.
So I mean,
Are you seeing that tonight?
I think so tonight.
Okay, so let me know tomorrow if I need to see it so we can do it on the podcast. Otherwise, are we still planning on Bride of Chucky?
Yeah, because after Megan, we were talking about doing some doll movies. So I mean, should we do Chucky or just Bride of Chucky?
I'm all about Bride of Chucky. But if you haven't seen Chucky, we could do that one.
Chucky. I've never seen the
first one. Also watched the original Twilight Zone episode called Living Doll.
Right, we
seems
could
like
do
all
that.
these movies are derivative.
Yeah, talking Tina there.
Yes.
We could do that. We could also do the third story of Trilogy of Terror with the little Zuni doll, which is really good. But anyway, we'll get it figured out. Yeah, Scott, thanks so much for joining us once
Thanks
again.
for having me. It was fun.
Great
Loved it. We'll have you on any old time you want to come on.
Yeah.
Other than that, we will catch you next week. Bye-bye.
Later.